The book of Ezra. It's a short one, but nevertheless an important one. So, this is a bit of a chronicle, just like we just read Chronicles. Well, I just read Chronicles. It reminded me a lot of that, at least in the beginning. And I have a visual timeline, which I think I have in every book, but in this one, it mentioned a lot about the timeline, so it made me look in there. I see from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, there's over 100-year span. So this is pretty much half the book is divided into the rebuilding of the altar, the rebuilding of the temple, the exiles coming in, and then the other half is the life of Ezra, and or not necessarily the whole life, but what Ezra did around here, around there at that time. So there's a lot about rebuilding. Chronicles ended with the king of Syria saying, "Go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple," and Ezra began with that. A lot of them don't start where one ends, but this one absolutely does. It actually starts with the wording, completes the wording that is started on the last one, and it chronicles who exile and how many exile and whatnot. It chronicles the altar being rebuilt, the people building the temple. It chronicled, them having fear for the new neighbors, the new people that lived there, but them still building the temple where the old one was. We know, there's a few things about the building of the temple and the rebuilding of the temple. I could look at it as a parable because I love looking at the Bible as more parable than more historical assertions in many ways. Specifically because I read books of wisdom as this, looking for the applicable nuggets, of wisdom. And there's not much of a nugget of wisdom in historical chronicles for me. That's a great conversational piece, it's a great argumentative piece, but it does me no good as far as how I could use it. Very specifically in days where they have, 700 wives, and, you can marry or should marry the person that you rape, and all the funky stuff happening, 3,000 years ago. Much less in some of the other wisdom books that are even much older than that. I mean, we got to remember we've been around for millions of years, and considering this is a pretty modern book, only two to 3,000 years, it's still not our cup of tea when we're looking at the historical facts or thought when it comes to how we walk our life. The historical does not inform me. The applicable, the lessons learned, the wisdom, that definitely does. So as far as historical and parable wise, they do make sure that they make a point that says, but many of the older priests, when they were celebrating about the foundation of the temple, many of the older priests, Levites, and leaders and other leaders who have seen the first temple wept aloud when they saw the new temple's foundation. So, in a historical manner, that can be that, God showed up for the first one. God was celebrated. God was there, was present. It was not only felt, but it was a whole different thing. And yet they built this one, and he's not showing up. He's not there. So it could be that. It could be something about So the rebuilding of the what I mean about the applicable wisdom, the rebuilding of the temple shows me a few things, in my applicable way. We sin a lot. We we cause we have this cause and effect. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. Well, we're imperfect beings, as perfect as we are. We're very imperfect in our actions, in our decisions, and sometimes we astray. So let's say, God created us. God gave us nothing but love. God gave us nothing but gifts. God gave us everything that we don't deserve, and we spat in His face over and over and over again. And we pretend that we're not angels. We pretend that we're not perfect beings. We pretend that we're not beautiful. And we make silly decisions and we go astray. Um, Thankfully, for the most part, if not always, we come back. We realize the wrong that we have made. We realize, generally after the cause and effect, after we get the punishment, right? After He lets the kings reign over us, after He lets the kings and the pharaohs, take us for slaves, after we pay the price, after we go and spend our time in prisons and in slavery and in less than desirable situations, He's always there for us when we come back. So, in the parable way that sometimes I take this is how I take this. He's always there to welcome us back, and not only that, but we see how the king has given him given them, these silvers, these golds, these incense. I mean, like 7,000 pounds of silver. I mean, it's just ridiculous amounts. Over 5,400 articles that they had taken. The king is saying, this is a little bit after, but the king says, use my tax dollars. Use the tax dollars that I get from my treasure, the king's treasure, to help them build it. It's God gives us undeserving treasures for us to rebuild the temple, rebuild ourselves. We are the temple. And that's a beautiful thing, because without hope, we're not much, we're not nothing. And to know and to have hope and to have faith that God would always be there for us if we turn back. If it's not too late, if we don't die before we do so, right? Before we repent. And that's when I see the mercy of God. I had not seen a lot of mercy in the first third of the Bible that I've read in the last 3 weeks. It's the 21st, 3 weeks. 14, I don't know, a lot of books. The first ones, it's hard to see mercy. But I think that is part of the storyline, part of how we take this as wisdom, how we take this as lessons, how we take this whole book of wisdom into our daily lives and how we put it to work. We see in the first third of the book how angry, how strong, just the greatness of this God, what he is capable of, and how much frustration he has gone through to allow us and give us the gift of life in this beautiful green earth. And he's struggled. And it's God, and it's hard to understand because, we have been taught that he is almighty, he is all knowing, he knows the future, he knows the past, he knows everything. And and to an extent, I don't think that we understand the whole concept. You know, time, he's not constrained or bound to time and space, but you know, looking backwards, we could connect the dots. We could there's remnants. Remnants was another word you see a lot. There's remnants. There's traces of history left along the path that we could put together, and that God could clearly see in a blink of an eye. But there is not the same of the future. And even though the future the reason he's not bound by time is because there is no future, there is no past, there's just the present. But the present is a canvas, and we start here, and that's where the remnants are. And the future is here unwritten. So he sees the whole canvas, but we haven't stepped on here yet. It's not that that he's bound. It's all here. It's all this present. The present is all there is. This canvas is all there is. But we have an option to draw here, or draw here. And we're still in the process of that. So that's where the free will, I believe, is. So he doesn't know where we're gonna go. Your name has been written in the book. This is the canvas. You are in this book already. You're not going anywhere. He knows that. He knows there is nothing more than this canvas. So he knows that when this canvas is done, it's done. And he has mercy that he wants you to to enjoy this canvas as much as possible. And he knows that part of it is the suffering. That's part of the journey. That it's a canvas. It's not a paper. It's a canvas, and the canvas has some bumpy roads on it. And but you get to create the canvas. So it's hard to understand, but I've come to realize that in the beginning, he doesn't know which steps are we're going to take, and he gets frustrated with us because we go this way when we should go that way. And he's telling us, he's giving us the direction, hey, paint this way. But because we have free will, we paint this way. Sometimes we get lazy and we choose to not have control of the brush, and or we get drunk. We have too much wine and we just let the brush just go crazy. But it's our fault. It may not be our fault, but it's our responsibility because he has given us the brush in our hand, and he gets frustrated with us. And sometimes we wonder, if he knew we were gonna do that, why even go through all this drama? But he doesn't know. He is knowing of all, but when he gives us free will, it's he keeps himself out of it. You know, there's one thing he surely knows. He surely knows that he's gonna be there for his children to pick them up when we fall on our faces because of our own doing. And that's where I see a lot of the mercy. And that's where I see about all these temples, or the same temple being rebuilt over and over again. And I see the temple being destroyed. And where we say he allowed the kings and the pharaohs to take over us, is because we don't see how he's not in control. He can be in control, but how fun would that be? How fun would life be? We would be puppets. It's like if he gave us AI, he gave us our own artificial intelligence, he gave us the control, he gave us the brush. Yes, he could move us along. Yes, he could infiltrate our minds and do it, but he locked himself out of your mind, you know, to give you that as a gift. Now, it's not always going to be that way. When you go back, when you're done in this canvas, you know, it's going to be different. It's that I don't know what that looks like. Maybe you go back to work. Maybe you become a all-knowing, and it's just not as fun anymore. Maybe this is this experience that we have here. But as his creation, as his children, per se, it's frustrating when our children do some things that we're teaching them not to do, and and it hurts us when they hurt, and we're there to catch them. But we know that they need to learn their lessons in order to grow, because we love them, and we know better. We know that if we move them and we grab them, if we interfere in their thoughts and their minds, they're never gonna. We're gonna keep them safe, but what's that? That's not love. That's not life. That's not respect. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. I think that's what I got out of these rebuilding the temples. And I think that's important. And I think that's the wisdom that I've extracted. That's what I could use in my daily life. And I've never looked at life and God and us as the canvas in this particular manner. I have never looked at the time bound, the space in this particular manner, but it makes sense. The parable makes sense. And the reason that that came to my mind and to my soul was continuous reading of the temple. It's not the historical. I could care less about how much it measured, what this, all that tells me that he is very specific, and he can interfere and do things extremely specific and extremely perfect, and he could have everything where it's super happy. But because he loves us, because he wants to give us this experience without any bonds, he's put himself in that situation where he's removed himself from total control, even though he shows you he absolutely can. So there's a lot. There's a lot. There's them writing to the governor, because they're like, these people have never listened. They've revolted against kings for centuries. Hey, governor, and your people and your judges, please look at your records, man. These people from Israel, they need to stop. They're building walls, and once they build them walls in this temple, they ain't gonna be paying no taxes and whatnot. And the governor is like, all right, man, I found out. I put in an order to see all these records, and you're right. Let's stop it. This leads to another letter to a king, Darius, and and he blesses them. He is, let it be rebuilt. We're the servants of God, but because our ancestors angered the God of heaven, he abandoned them to King whatever from Babylon, and so they're like, okay, keep on looking at the records, and you'll see that King Cyrus has allowed us and has given us these gifts to do so. And he's like, oh, you're right. And that's where I start seeing remnant. And remnant is mentioned a lot in the New Testament. And remnant, and it's also one of the effective things and the analogy that I've been using with the canvas, because God sees the remnant of perfection, the remnant of love, the remnant of his light in all of us. The remnant, meaning just a little piece, just a little brightness. He sees this little shine. It's like the yin yang. There's all this black, but there's this little white. There's this little clearness. And throughout the Bible, it does speak on remnants. And in this book of only, I think, 10 chapters, it mentions remnant quite a few times. And I know from reading the gospel and specifically the gospel in Romans, I believe, it does speak on the remnant as well. And, in the application of the canvas, I think that's where he sees himself in us. He sees the rebel in us. He sees the beauty in us. He sees the love in us. He sees the pain in us. He sees a remnant of himself. Stay away from there. Do not disturb the construction. He's telling the people that are complaining. I decree that you are to help the elders of the Jews. Those who violate this decree, a beam will be pulled from your house, and you will be impaled on it. And your house will be reduced to a pile of rubble. Now, they're very, very harsh in their words, but we, the people, are very hard-headed. We got to be told very specific ways of punishment, and we still do the wrong thing. I, Darius, have issued this decree. Let it be obeyed with all diligence. The temple was finally finished. And then Ezra pops in chapter 7. And he was a scribe. He was, well versed in the law of Moses. And seventh year. I always highlight sevens. Not always, but a lot of the times. Ezra had determined to study and obey the law of the Lord and teach those degree regulations. He was sent basically to teach the people about the law, because it had been so long since the law of Moses had been really put into place, really governed, really taught. Again, it's kind of like remnant again. We've had remnants through Israel here and there, and it's just like Josiah, when not Elijah, but the Josiah's priests discovered the law of Moses in the temple, and Josiah's ripping his cloak and ashes in his head and whatnot. It's like, oh my God, we haven't been following this. So it's like there's been remnants, there's been talks about it, but people don't really listen to it. People don't been preaching about it. It's been, gone through the wayside. And here's Ezra to really teach that. 7 again. You make it from the royal treasury. You may take it from the royal treasury. Here's where I'm talking about, the letter to Ezra from the king, saying, listen, finish building it. If you need anything else, just take it from the treasury. Here's where it talks about you're to give him 7,500 pounds of, this is another time, 7,500 pounds of silver, 500 pounds of bushels of wheat, 550 gallons of wine, 550 gallons of olive oil, unlimited salt supply. I also decree that no priest, Levite, singer, gatekeeper, all these folks that don't have to pay taxes. This is the first time that I see that church is exempt from taxes. It's probably why they're still exempt from taxes. Now we have, 24 tons of silver. It's 7,500 pounds of gold. Tons, 24 tons, that's 48,000 pounds of silver. And it has Ezra's basically the way that he governs, the way that he teaches. It has some chronicle of who exiled and returned with Ezra. Obviously, there was a lot of intermarriages. It's almost impossible not to, but these are, some people think that they have pure blood. We know some negative ones in society that want pure blood, but to me, it's just impossible. And it's impossible to not have, diversity. It's and over here, that's one of my questions is that, they're like, oh man, we didn't follow the law. We were supposed to, stay within ourselves and marry within ourselves, and we've married Moabites, Egyptians, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Genuites, Canaanites, and it's detestable. I don't. It's not my place to agree or disagree, but this is one of those things that I'm like, diversity is good. Don't let your daughters marry their sons. Don't take their daughters as wives to your sons. And this will really bother me. Don't ever promote the peace and prosperity of those nations. It's and I really think that that's really man-made. I don't think, no matter what, no matter who, no matter the times, I don't think that God would ever say that. I think that there's a lot of things that are from God. I believe when God inspires people to write, I think that that's coming from God. But I'm a big believer that there's a lot of man-made stuff that has used the vehicle of God's word, and that's just to me one of them. There's a lot of egotism there. There's a lot of need for control there, where it says we don't want to marry others because we don't want to promote the peace and prosperity of other nations. God has proven to be merciful in the rebuilding of the temples with us, and the love of us, and the remnants, the noticeable remnant of us, of Him within us. But that's just my opinion. That's not. The Bible is clearly saying, don't ever promote the peace and prosperity of those nations. Don't let your daughters marry their son. Don't take their. That's clearly what it says here. That's not. My opinion is otherwise. The people confessing their sins, let us now make a covenant. Again, the man-made thing of saying, let's make a covenant with our God to divorce our pagan wives and to send them away with their children. Okay. Separate yourselves from the people of the land and from these pagan women. And it finishes with that. Each of these men had a pagan wife, and some had children by these wives. And then it has a chronicle of everybody that was guilty of intermarriage. And that was Ezra. I think that I got a lot out of this. This is the wisdom that I search for, where I I read something that is, the little story that I wrote yesterday, it's all about what do you get out of it, not the accuracy of the words written. And that's how I see Ezra. It's not the accuracy that was important to me of the words written, but what do the words, what storyline, what lessons, what journey, what wisdom are those words taking you to? Yesterday in Jackson's birthday party, Jackson kept on grabbing people, including myself, by the hand and walking them through. And that's how I feel Ezra and many books of the Bible is. What journey is that book taking you on? And that journey took me into God's mercy and God's reflection of himself within us, seeing just remnants, just a trace. Such an imperfect being that we are, but he created us with some remnants of him in us. And that could be the single cell that we begin from. That could be the one dot that is our soul. For our soul, we want to think it's this spirit the size of us, or this little ball of fire or flame, or a spirit that's translucent that looks just like us, because we could relate to that. But it could just be a little dot. It could be one cell. It could be an atom. It could be a neutron. It could be the size of a bacteria or a virus. It could be a remnant of God, smaller than a speck of dust. And that's what I got out of Ezra.